SeaWorld has been going crazy with new coaster additions over the last few years. After Iron Gwazi's success at Busch Gardens Tampa, could SeaWorld be about to outdo Iron Gwazi at one of their other parks? The SeaWorld chain has been extremely ambitious when it comes to adding new coasters lately. After the success of Iron Gwazi, SeaWorld will definitely want to replicate that with more coasters from RMC at some of their other parks. But I think they may be about to go crazy. If you look at the Busch Gardens park SeaWorld owns, you'll notice a sort of pattern. They both seem to get relatively similar coasters around the same times as each other. Not every coaster they get will be the same, and even if they get very similar rides, they can still be very different. Let me explain what I mean. Busch Gardens Tampa got the very first B&M dive coaster Shakira in 2005, and just 2 years later, the chain followed up with a very similar ride from the same manufacturer when they opened Griffon, the B&M dive coaster at Busch Gardens Williamsburg. This wasn't the only time they got similar coasters though. In 1996, Busch Gardens Tampa opened Montu, their B&M invert, and it only took a year before SeaWorld decided to give Busch Gardens Williamsburg a B&M invert of their own in 1997, Alpengeist. The same went for Cheetah Hunt. Busch Gardens Tampa opened a themed family-style thrilling launch coaster in 2011 with Cheetah Hunt, and just a year later, Busch Gardens Williamsburg opened a themed family thrilling launch coaster of their own with Verbolten. Both these parks' launch coasters are very unique and different from each other, yet once again, they share many similarities and were built around the same time. Both parks also got kiddie coasters within a year of each other and family coasters within 2 years of each other. Oh, and how can I forget, both parks got their very own premier ride, Skyrocket too. It's safe to say the Busch Gardens parks copy each other a lot of the time, and after the massive success of Iron Gwazi, why wouldn't Busch Gardens Williamsburg want to replicate that success with a ground-up hybrid of their own? The Busch Gardens parks are some of the most visited amusement parks in the entire world, and they are some of the best, well-rounded, and nicest parks in all of America. Busch Gardens Williamsburg getting a massive RMC would be awesome, but how awesome would it actually be? And how soon could we see it happen? If Busch Gardens Williamsburg does get a massive RMC, will SeaWorld go overboard and outdo Iron Gwazi? Or would they rather make it not as good to keep Iron Gwazi in the front lines as a potential #1 best coaster in the world? Before I get to how good Busch Gardens Williamsburg's potential RMC could be, and whether or not it will outdo Iron Gwazi, there's another SeaWorld park that could get an insane RMC before Busch Gardens Williamsburg. That park is SeaWorld Orlando. If you look at SeaWorld Orlando, you'll notice they have very different coasters than Busch Gardens Tampa. One park has a B&M Hyper, Florist, and Flyer, while the other park has a B&M sit-down, invert, and dive. This is done purposely to offer a very different experience in these two Florida parks in order to attract guests to visit both SeaWorld parks during their vacation. Since Busch Gardens Tampa already has an RMC hybrid, then it's pretty unlikely SeaWorld Orlando will get the same model. That's where the Raptor comes in. SeaWorld Orlando would be the perfect candidate for an RMC Raptor, and it could definitely become one of the best coasters in the world and potentially the best coaster at the park. The big problem with the Raptors is capacity, but if they make it a dueling Raptor, that wouldn't be an issue anymore since they'd be doubling the capacity. So let's look at SeaWorld Orlando's timetable and see if it makes sense for them to get a Raptor. SeaWorld Orlando's most recent coaster was Icebreaker, which was delayed from 2020 to 2022. Then after that, for 2023, SeaWorld is opening the first ever B&M Surf Coaster, which is a launch coaster with what looks to be unique stand-up sitting. SeaWorld is opening up 3 new coasters in 2023, so let's just say they spend 2024 focusing on the parks that aren't getting coasters in 2023. That would mean SeaWorld Orlando could be looking at a new coaster as early as 2025, and then they might want to go for an RMC Raptor. I'm not sure the SeaWorld chain is gonna go crazy in RMC right now and buy one for every one of their parks, and as much as I'd love to see an RMC Raptor at SeaWorld Orlando, and as much sense as it would make, I am still not confident they go for that as their next coaster, but it's definitely a possibility. Now let's get back to Busch Gardens Williamsburg, which is much more likely to get an RMC in the very near future, especially since Busch Gardens parks copy each other very often when it comes to getting new coasters. Busch Gardens Williamsburg just got Pantheon delayed from 2022 to 2022, and already in 2023 they're getting a new coaster. It's nothing so major, but it will be some sort of unique launched indoor family coaster replacing Curse of the Dark Castle. Busch Gardens Williamsburg usually gets new coasters every 2 to 3 years, so let's say we're looking at 2025 or 2026 for the next coaster. Well, by that time, we'd already likely have a bunch more RMCs opening around the world, and there's a good chance there will be some that are better than Iron Gwazi and Steel Vengeance. If Busch Gardens Williamsburg decides to go for an RMC hybrid for the next coaster, then I definitely think they will outdo Iron Gwazi. It will be far enough down the line that it wouldn't take away from Iron Gwazi, and making the best RMC ever never hurts. I think Busch Gardens Williamsburg could open a 250-foot RMC Hyper Hybrid that opens as the tallest, fastest, steepest, and longest RMC in existence and becomes one of the greatest coasters to ever be built on the planet. They wouldn't have to break the bank for a coaster like this, and it would literally be the perfect option. Yes, the coaster would have to be ground up, but if FunSpot is able to do it, I guarantee you SeaWorld can do it too. I'm not sure what they call this massive, insane RMC, but it would definitely draw in a lot of people to an already buzzing park and would finally give Busch Gardens Williamsburg a true standout coaster. Busch Gardens Williamsburg just opened Pantheon, and that was supposed to be their best coaster by far. But somehow, there are still a lot of people that only rank Pantheon second or third in the park. Busch Gardens Williamsburg called on Intamin for a coaster that could have been the next Velocicoaster. But did Intamin fail to deliver? Is Intamin back in decline and once again a huge headache for parks to work with? Click here to watch my video on Intamin and why their future might not look as bright after Pantheon.